morning. Welcome to the August Housing Opportunity Fund Advisory Board. We always start each meeting with public comment. We have a sign-in sheet, so I'll just call the names. Sabrina Clark, you have approximately 3 minutes to address the advisory board.
I wanted to come and make an appeal regarding the rules in the decisions that disqualify me for help from the Housing Opportunity Fund, in particular the Housing Stabilization Program. I've contacted Pittsburgh Mercy, Urban League and the YMCA, and basically told that by Pittsburgh Mercy, April Ziner, that my work history is too unstable. Well, I have a great work history. It wasn't unstable until 1.5 years ago. So it's been tough, trying to get employment, but I am currently working. I am in training right now. And so I will, have employment, but I'm told because the position, it's with the U.S. Census Bureau, but it's temporary, but I have the opportunity to stay on with them long term. So I just wanted to appeal that decision. Thank you.
Is there anybody else for public comment? Okay.
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Celeste Scott. I am the Housing Justice Organizer for Pittsburgh United. I just wanted to come and thank the advisory board for really pushing for the housing stabilization program and to give you a report of how many people have come to our meeting. So we've done the Hill, we've done the North Side, and we've done the West End. We've had 150 people for each meeting. And I think for the West End, we were like, whoa. So, we've been having meetings with the Housing Opportunity Fund staff. We've been trying to come up with what the barriers are, what the solutions are. And I think we just want to keep that going. I've been getting calls from folks, some that are getting accepted, some that need some help navigating, and just to implore everyone, when people are going through trauma, it's been really rough talking to people, and I know the program is getting up and started, and Jessica and Bettina and Jamie, all of the staff and I have really been trying to work towards clarity and getting some things done. So I just wanted to say that and to thank the advisory board for really making some tough decisions and pushing and really looking out for all of Pittsburgh. And making sure that the city is a Pittsburgh for all. So I hope we can continue these conversations. We do have a date for Michael Anderson and Laura Licktash, which will be October 4th, to come and talk about best practices. And I think we can really learn from other places like Philly and National Trust Funds on how we can really make this work for everyone. So thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Okay. We're going to move forward to call roll. Mark.
I had a question about one of the comments.
Okay.
What is the appeal process if somebody is turned down by one of the agencies that we're funding?
Yeah, we're going to talk about that on the agenda when we do program updates. Okay. Let's call roll. Nina Andrews.
Here.
Jamil Bey.
Here.
Richard Butler. Kyle is not on the committee anymore. Joanna.
Here.
Jerome, Teresa, Majestic, Mark Masterson.
Here.
Valerie McDonald Roberts, Leslie Springs, Samuel Sue.
Here.
Sonia Tillman.
Here.
Derek Tillman. Diamante Walker. Adrian Wanahall.
Here on the phone.
Adrian's on the phone. We have 7, counting Adrian on the phone, we have 7 people that we had stated earlier that the advisory board is normally 17 people, but we have some seats that are currently vacant. So we technically have 12 active members right now, and therefore a quorum is 7. We do have a quorum present. We also need a group of 4 folks for vote after people abstain from votes. We're a little concerned that we do not have that at this point. So we are going to be moving forward with some of the items further down on the agenda, and we'll come back to the beginning of the agenda momentarily. So if we could start, Evan, let's see. I guess E, discussion of RFPs for 2019 funding. We can accept the minutes, good point. Jamil, let's accept the minutes. Does anyone have any questions or concerns about the minutes?
Move to accept.
Second?
Okay, Mark accepted, Jamil seconded. We're recording, right? Okay. All everyone, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Adrian's aye. Okay, the minutes have passed. Okay, we are tentatively going to skip D and move on to E. And E actually relates to D, so it's probably a better order to do E first anyhow. So RFPs for 2019 funding, and this is the 2019 allocation plan in front of us. And I think everyone's so used to the 2018 allocation plan that it kind of snuck up on us when we started to get additional applications for the rental gap program that now we need to roll into 2019. So we wanted a brief conversation about how to handle the request for proposals for the 2019 allocation round. And we have been emailing the advisory board, and the requests that we currently have exceed 2018 amounts and need to roll into 2019. So for public record, would like to discuss, the ability to be able to use the same rolling RFP that is currently on the website for the rental program specifically. The other programs as well will start to roll into. We're going to be coming up to 2019 funding, needing to commit 2019 funding within the next couple months. Later on in the agenda, we're going to go through the programs and the expenditures, but the housing stabilization program specifically is expending at a very fast rate. So we do need to talk about leaving the rolling RFPs on our website, and also the ability to extend contracts with service providers and program administrators as they run out of funding, and still be able to add new groups if the rolling RFP is out there. So I guess the discussion point or the question is the committee comfortable with continuing to roll the rental RFP and then also continuing to roll the others as long as we allow new folks to come into the system?
Jessica, before we start, is there a typo? Yes. I think it's, okay.
Yep, so for the public as well, on the second line, renters stay in their homes, extremely low income, it says 5.5, it should say 0.5.
It's a big difference.
It's a big difference.
So as far as the RFPs, for those programs that were active in 2018, there was no difference in, as we discussed, program rules for 2019, so I don't see a problem with rolling those RFPs.
What feedback did we get from applicants or people that have gone through the process? I mean, were there any issues that the staff noted that, next round, we really want to tweak this to make it more clear, or?
Come up to me.
Or even at the meetings you held, people may have given feedback.
I would say, on the whole, that people positively reacted to the application process. We could tighten up certain areas of the applications, and I don't know what our ability to do that would be. We have amended RFPs in the past. If it doesn't really substantially change sort of like what we're asking for. It just helps people to like more easily convey what their organization's situation is or something like that. We can do that.
Do you feel like those rules are more, that those comments are more about the program rules or implementation?
No, it was probably more about just the mechanics of like applying
Yeah.
to the programs. Like,
Yeah.
I'm thinking like in the rental gap program, the energy metric is like kind of hard for anybody to score points on. Like we might want to look at if we want to like change that a little, because like almost nobody's like scoring points on that. But I don't think that sort of completely changes the whole program.
Right, and to Sonia's question, I mean, we're not proposing changing the guidelines for the rental gap program at this point. So, thanks, Evan.
The only concern is the one that Joanna's raised, is about a recusal. You know, I know what and we just talked about this a little bit as a question earlier before the meeting started, was HRNA had recommended that the recusals be by program year, but what we get into rolling through with a couple or maybe 3 program years that are going to might be mixed together, we're not going to have anybody left, I don't think, that can actually vote on these things because of the number of projects that'll be going through. So we're going to have to find a way to address that. And if that can be addressed, so I don't have to recuse myself on 2019 funds if I don't have a conflict, yeah, I don't see any issue.
I mean, so the discussion with HRNA advisors was, their recommendation at the time was to have the recusal based on funding year, kind of recognizing, you know, what Mark said, that if all the funding years start to move together, that could be a lot of recusals. So we'll stick with that. Today, these particular deals are funded in joint funding years. They're crossing over to 2018, 2019 divide, but after this series, you know, depending on if these are approved or not, the next ones will all be in 2019, so we'll be able to, you know, start a new year, and members will be asked to recuse themselves based on the conflict of interest policy at that point for 2019 funds. Okay, so is there any more questions on this, or do we, I guess we don't technically, oh, go ahead.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
So the rental gap RFP requires doing a P4 analysis. So is the URA still using, I just wasn't sure what the state of P4 was and whether that
Evan, I
requirement
think your mic is on right there.
makes sense.
I think it's not being as widely used by the URA as but when we were looking for sort of like metrics about a year ago, it sort of made sense to do before, but I mean, we're willing to or how we that proposal.
Just come to the mic.
I serve on the P4 committee for the URA as a whole, and as an authority, the sort of cutoff to where we're using the P4 performance measures is a $2 million budget. So given that it's a $3.75 million line item, I'm not sure how many of the projects will reach that $2 million threshold. Or if you wanted to apply it as $2 million of HOF funds. The other thing I will say, and Diamante, just walking in, is also on that committee. We're talking about the status of the P4 performance measures at the URA. At present, we're continuing to use it, but we are also having conversations about how to make that a little bit easier to navigate, how to possibly think about it a little bit more akin to the way that we do the MWBE processes in terms of using a narrative or something like that.
And that's active, so the narrative process is already in place, and we can start to use that for how we
Great, thank you. Okay. So are there any other questions regarding the 2019? Okay, so I don't.
Actually, I do. I'm
yeah,
sorry.
go ahead.
So your conflict can go away, right? So if we don't anticipate, if after there's a vote on your project in a rolling funding year, if you don't anticipate additional applications in that funding year, doesn't your conflict go away?
Right, so,
No,
That's not how it works
Does it?
for
If you
2018.
had a project in 2019, you don't vote on any projects. in
Anymore, right,
2019.
okay.
yeah, maybe I misunderstood. Yeah, what he
But what
said.
if you don't know if you'll have a project in 2019?
Then you don't have a conflict. If you don't know.
But then what if you have one later? And we can talk
When you,
about it.
when you know that when you think that you're gonna have a project,
Yeah.
not even know, when you think that you might have a project, you have a conflict.
Okay.
I thought you were just out though, like once you started participating and abstaining, or like I've been reviewing all the applications. So I thought that once you know you could have a project or it's even possible, you're supposed to recuse.
Yeah, you are.
But like even if you started vetting, I don't think you can, like what, I'm kind of disagreeing with you. Like, can you then start, and then can you apply? Because you've already reviewed applications, you've already been vetting, and then you're applying, so.
My concern is that half this table would not be here. So I would encourage us to do a little bit more deep thinking around the conflicts issue, and when something is appropriate to give disclosure, and when it's appropriate to say I actually have a real conflict because I am on both sides of this deal potentially, because we have to operate with ethics. And that's why you're a part of this board, but we're all going to have to stand up and there won't be any vote on most of this stuff if that's the way that we approach it. And maybe that's something that we need to talk about over the next 90 days to work through that.
I thought that's what we did though for 2018.
I don't think we did it sufficiently.
Oh, we had a lot of discussion
We had
about
a lot
conflict,
of discussion,
and
but I don't.
there's enough distrust of government that we need to be, I would rather err on the side of recusal and make sure that everybody's above reproach, because we've seen that with members of this committee that have that as a concern. So I
wouldn't disagree with that, but I think that I'm going to take it a step further and say that if you have to recuse yourself from 100% of the votes, should you be on the advisory board?
True.
Yeah. So do we need advisory board members for different programs that are not as close to projects as some others? I mean, I'm saying we need to think about that, because if you can't vote 100% of the time, how do we ever get to quorum?
I don't think we'll have anybody that can't vote 100% of the time on all the programs. I think that there's just different.
On this program.
Well, but then there's folks that are expert in perhaps homeless services that might not be able to vote on anything there, but you certainly would want that opinion as you're formulating policies about how to effectively address that. I think we did discuss it quite a bit.
I think that now that we've been doing it for a year, we need to, and we should always be constantly looking at this and thinking about it. We shouldn't just say, oh, we talked about it extensively, it doesn't need a revisit. I think if we're really going to be good stewards, let's revisit it and see the best path forward.
You have a recommendation then, or you think we should continue talking?
I'm going to ask staff to maybe give some thought to it and help us work through it for 2019.
Yeah, and I would like to check back in with HRNA advisors who drafted the conflict of interest policy to begin with, and so we'll report back to you for next month with that. Okay. I don't think we need a resolution for RFP for 2019 funding, just for the minutes. I kind of just want the statement, so it basically, go ahead, Mark. Do you have
That's for the rental gap program only.
however you want it to be worded in the minutes. Today specifically, we need, approval to roll the rental gap RFP into 2019. I would say in the next 2 to 3 months, the HSP program, the existing service providers will probably, have their contracts fully drawn, and there's also 2 HAP, which is the homeowner assistance program, providers that are currently working on bidding enough houses that will fulfill their full contracts. So we will need to either amend their contract to increase it or bring on new folks. So I would say in 2 or 3 months, we're going to need direction on how to handle that. So if the advisory board is comfortable with letting us hold a rolling RFP for those programs to give the URA the ability to amend to increase contracts for the providers that are currently doing a good job and flowing through them, while also allowing new groups to apply. If you're comfortable making that statement today, great. Otherwise we can revisit those other programs next month.
I'd like to revisit it. We just heard some public comment about appeal. If we don't have to do that right now, maybe we should get some more data on how those programs are working and what does happen when somebody is told that they don't qualify, and how to, what's that process look like? And we might need to adjust what's in those contracts or make some adjustments to those programs, that we're making sure that we're serving the folks that the fund's intended to serve.
I mean, to that point, and we can have this discussion later on if time allows, but to address Mark's issues, that might be, you might be suggesting changes to program guidelines, which would be a different process in and of itself.
But when do we look at program guidelines as we hit a new fiscal year?
If you would like to do that before the 2019 funding round, that would be a good time to do that.
Like, we should be talking about that in addition to, because that's the more substantial piece.
Okay, so maybe it would be good, I guess, if someone can make a resolution for the RGP program.
Make a resolution that there's a rolling RFP for the rental gap program for 2019.
Second. Diamante seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carried. That gives us the ability to look at the D developments. I think we have 4 folks currently that, counting Adrian, who's on the phone. Can those of you who need to abstain step away, and we can see how many?
We need to declare that first.
Yes, can you please declare?
I need to abstain.
I need to abstain.
Okay, so Mark,
I also
Lena.
will need to abstain.
Sonia,
I need to abstain.
Sam. Okay, we still have Adrian on the phone. We have 3 other people.
This is what I'm talking about, right? Do you understand?
And I honestly cannot remember if we need 4 or 5 voting members, but we will proceed with the 4 we have. We will check the minutes. If we do need 5, we will probably do a roll call via phone if members are comfortable with that. Okay. So Evan, if I can call you up, we've been out of order today, I'm sorry everybody, but if we will move to D, recommend the approval of the rental gap program for 2 developments.
Good morning. We've got 2 projects today going before the advisory board. The first is called City's Edge. It's in the uptown neighborhood of Pittsburgh at 1450 Caldwell Street. The developer for City's Edge is Midpoint Group of Companies, Midpoint for short. This is in Council District 6. The nonprofit applicant for this project is the Hill CDC. And this project is the new construction of a 10-story mixed-use structure. There's going to be a 508-space parking garage on floors 2 through 6, 17,000 square feet of commercial and community space on the first floor, and then 110 units of rental housing on the top 5 floors. In that first floor space, that community and commercial space, there's slated to be a daycare, minority women-owned business incubation space, as well as a restaurant. And is the residential portion, there's 77 affordable units and 33 market rate units. The project has already been awarded both 4% and 9% low-income housing tax credits from PHFA. And the rental gap program loan before us today will be used on the 4% low-income housing tax credit section of the project. Currently, the site is a surface parking lot that's owned by the URA. Midpoint intends to close on the land transaction as well as the financing in fall 2019, and there's a construction period of approximately 20 months that begins almost immediately upon closing. So the building is planned to be in service in July of 2021. So there are 110 total units, 77 will be rented affordably. HOF funds are going to be tied to 41 of those 77 affordable units. 8 of the units will be rented to households at or below 30% AMI, and then 33 will be rented to households at or below 50. The difference between, there's 77 affordable units, 41 that will be HOF deed restricted. That's because the balance will be rented to up to 60% as part of their financing with the Housing Authority. The loan that is actually before us today, the requested amount was for $1 million, and the recommended amount is for that full $1 million. Should the loan be approved, $480,000 would be taken from the 30% set aside, and $520,000 would be taken from the rental gap program's 50% set aside. There would be a 0% interest rate or a rate that's determined at a later date by the tax credit equity investor. And the term of the loan would be for 35 years and would be a cash flow loan. The Housing Opportunity Fund would have subordinate lien position on the property at 1450 Caldwell Street as part of this deal. And the developer has agreed to a 99-year term of affordability. However, we need to run that by all of the lenders in this deal to make sure that that happens. But that permanent affordability is something that we're very pleased about. The instrument for maintaining that affordability will be deed restrictions, again, 8 at 30%, at or below 30% AMI, and 33 units at or below 50% AMI. So it's a very complex deal with the residential and commercial sides kind of all coming together at once. So I'm going to kick it over to Jessica to talk a little bit about their...
Before I do, did someone just join the line? Adrian, are you still on? Adrian? All right, hopefully she calls back in. Okay, so yeah, to Evan's statement, this is a very complicated development. This is, a very large 110 units of housing, mixed income, that is using 2 low-income housing tax credit vehicles through the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency, a 9% allocation award and a 4% award. And I think this is the first time that this has ever happened in the city of Pittsburgh, where somebody has used both a 9% and a 4% award of low-income housing tax credits. Additionally, it's also mixed, in addition to being mixed income, as Evan said, it is mixed use with a parking garage and commercial with office space and retail space. Therefore, you will see in your packet that there is a very large number of funding sources. And there is a whole team of folks at the URA right now that are combing through these funding sources. And you can see there's a lot of different, both public and private sources, in addition to the low-income housing tax credit equity, which is broken out in a 4% and 9%, what we call condo for purposes of separating the units for IRS purposes. There's also both taxable and tax-exempt bond financing. The taxable bond financing comes through an authorization of volume cap that PHFA authorizes at the same time that they authorize 4% low-income housing tax credits. And then you will also see that the Housing Authority of the City of Pittsburgh is putting a sizable $5 million amount of bricks and mortar money, along with a project-based voucher operating subsidy for that. And there are other sources. The fair money is related to PHFA as well. There is several private financiers involved in this, and you can see that it's broken out in your packet, both residential and commercial. Because of the intense amount of sources, all the funders are working together, looking at everybody's term sheets. So when we do, move towards a motion on this item, I do want to state that we are still in the process of looking at term sheets and seeing if financing is final. So we will, request that be listed. If there is a motion for this item, that it would be contingent upon all financing being final for this item, because at this point, we cannot say that, and this project, if it is approved by the advisory board today, maybe another month or so before it goes to the governing board for this, which is the URA, as we continue to look through these financing sources. Additionally, there is litigation pending on the site for this property, and it is related to basically an argument with a previous user of the site as to what their leasing ability might be after this development is done. And this litigation is pending right now. It may be heard sometime soon in court, but any motion that this advisory board would make would need to be contingent on that litigation being resolved. So I do need to mention that as well. So
When you say resolved, do you mean resolved in favor of the development team, or just resolved, period?
it needs to be resolved so that there is no lien or citation tied to the property. The URA currently owns the property, but in any transaction, the property needs to have clean title when it transfers. And so litigation needs to be resolved so that the property has clean title and there is no encumbrances or liens or outstanding litigation tied to the property.
So subject to all financing being in place and the ability to transfer clean title?
Correct.
Okay.
The development team is here. Nate and Cindy, can you come up to the mic, and if any of the advisory board has questions, they can ask you.
The nonprofit partner, also the actual applicant?
Yes, and
Okay.
David Serban with the Hill CDC.
Yeah, and just to,
Yeah.
for the record, there is a nonprofit applicant, the Hill CDC, an executed agreement of management between Midpoint and the Hill CDC was included in the materials. So the Hill CDC will be serving as the property manager for the commercial space in the building, and will also have a role in the evaluation and retention of the residential property manager as well.
I just want to make sure that we always have the actual applicant come up, because that's who's
Right.
eligible for the funding.
Good morning, my name is Peter Daniel. Thank you very much for inviting us here today. We have a very full team here. I would like to introduce everyone, also ask Mr. Howard Coffey, who is the lead counsel for Midpoint, to join us, because he may want to elucidate a little bit more on the legal issue. I also have Ms. Terry Lee, who is our WB partner. She's going to join us. And thanks to Cindy. Cindy is with Diamond and Associates. They are working with us, leading the charge on putting together this complex condo structure of a 4%, 9%, and a commercial condo. And then Dave Serban, who is representing the Hill CDC, is here with us this morning. Before we get started, I just want to thank Robert and the URA. I want to thank Councilman Lavelle, who has been extremely supportive of this project, Mayor Poduto, who is very much supportive of us, and Brian Hudson and the PHFA team. It's been a couple years working on this project, day and night, a lot of sleepless nights, but we are very close to the margin. So we appreciate that you're giving us the opportunity to present our project before you today.
there any questions for Nate or his team, or for David, who represents the Hill CDC?
How is this funding instrumental in addressing affordability? Was it able to help you provide additional affordable units? Yeah, can you speak to that?
Please state the.
Yeah.
That relates to my question. What happens if we say no? Where does this project go?
Well, Maypoint has to look at other sources. I think, as you can see, we always make the argument that this is a but-for sort of project. It has many sources, but we really need your support in terms of $1 million out of $62 million that we're looking for. So we hope that you will provide a positive support for this project.
And Joanna, I would add that from like the HOF perspective, this project being willing to have extended permanent affordability sort of helps to continue to build out our already pretty like robust portfolio of deals that we've helped throughout the city. And then also kind of notable about this is that I think between 10 and 12, I don't have a number right in front of me, of the deed restricted units that HOF will be placing deed restrictions on will be 2-bedroom units, which has been not as frequent in the projects that we've been seeing. So they obviously, Midpoint sees it as a much needed investment, but we also see it as a good investment as well.
The number of affordable units and the targeting already existed. It's not like, oh, if we go to the Housing Opportunity Fund, we can go deeper in subsidy or anything like that. Everything
Longer.
It was
subsidy.
yeah, or it was mainly longer, but not deeper. Okay.
And I would argue that I would like to see longer affordability to give families continued opportunities to take advantage of affordable housing. So I think that's a great thing.
So, and it is the legislation's goal by year 5 that half of everything we do is permanent, which is defined as 99 years. So what the team has agreed to, I'm trying to see where we were, the team has agreed to the 99 years. Now, we did put, I think, in here, pending approval from all other lenders, because when there is 30 lenders in the deal, we just wanted to state that in case somebody does, object, but the goal is for this to be 99 years.
Right, just to follow up on that, at least as you will see from what we presented, is that we have at least 10% of the units are at 20% of AMI, and then we have a lot of the units at 50% of AMI. So all 77 units would be below 60% of AMI. This project, we started the planning process with the URA long before, the HOF came into being. But at least our projects sort of dovetail or tie into the objectives of the HOF funding. And with the support, from Councilman Lavelle and the mayor, we believe that, our project can be one of the catalytic projects, for the HOF funding.
$1 million is a lot. I mean, that's a tenth of the money for a year. So, I mean, it is a lot of units, but just want to, we're giving the full amount, recommending.
We need to spend the money, and we need to spend the money on projects that are able to advance forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the logic why staff is recommending a full $1 million on this is because it is a 110 unit. Like if you look at some of the size of the other deals, this one is 110 with 77. That's a very large amount. I mean, most low-income housing tax credit deals are capped out at like 40 or 45, and this one is much higher because it has both allocations of tax credits. So that was sort of one of the reasons why it seemed, like in terms of a per unit amount, that the request was consistent with others. Additionally, with this being an uptown so close to downtown and also Oakland for
In the Lower
job
Hill.
opportunities.
I think the Lower Hill opportunity, we want people to have affordable opportunities next to what we know will be a vibrant neighborhood. So we need to plan for that now and not try to address it on the back end.
So pardon my back, I have to speak into the microphone for the record. So I think what we're trying to balance, on the one hand, this checks a lot of boxes, and on the other hand, it's taking a whole lot of money that this is a team that has the savvy to raise $61 million without us, that extra $1 million may make sense to think about how we invest that in neighborhood programs with smaller organizations that don't have this sort of capacity. And I think that's the tension and balance that has me, thinking about this a little differently. And you brought this point up earlier. Why is it so difficult for the energy metrics? So there's a 0 in the energy metrics.
So the in this case, it's a project of over 25 with 25 or more units. So it's that then triggers this enterprise green communities metric that we worked with HR&A to implement, and a lot of developments are not kind of going by that particular metric. So it's a little bit too, I think, specific. When we kind of revisit how we're gonna score these, we might want to back it off a little bit and figure out a way to have it be kind of more capture generally energy efficiency. Maybe someone from the development team can talk a little bit about their energy use. Like it's a brand new building and it's going to be energy efficient. It just didn't score with like how
with that particular measure.
Yes.
So these Energy Star appliances and those sorts of things.
Right, and that would only count for a project of fewer than 25 units.
But
So
are those kinds of things, we're not measuring those, but they may be included here?
They may be included. The problem is the way that the scoring sort of was set out before we had seen a whole year's worth of projects was that doesn't score them any points, where, if going back on it, I think that there's certainly a case to be made that should score them points. But
If I may, there are energy efficiency standards the project will meet that are set by the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency. So it will be extremely energy efficient and highly insulated and meet certain HERS ratings and the like.
Right, that's what I'm looking at, but that's what I'm assuming. But then you have a 0 here, and that sort of.
There are complications having to do with the mixed use of the structure that we want to make sure we're able to comply with. But I will assure you the high energy efficiencies will be in place, and energy efficient appliances and lighting, and we're seeking a small energy rebate as a result.
David, can you speak to the Hill CDC's role in the project?
Yes, thank you very much. Hill CDC is very excited to be a partner in the project. We believe that it's a real role to have that property management oversight and actually to provide the property management on a portion of the project. So we're excited, as I said, to be a part of it. And I also want to mention that we have a robust development review panel that's gone over this project. So it's been before the community several times and was highly rated.
You've been involved since the beginning then?
No, we weren't. Well, it came to us at the development review panel, the DRP. So we've been involved in shepherding it to the community to make sure it was understood and was presented. So the details of it went forward. But it was only when the Housing Opportunity Fund became available for the project that we were brought in as a partner.
Any other questions for the development team or comments?
This is Adrian on the phone. Can you hear me?
Yes, Adrian, go ahead.
I am missing probably 90% of the commentary that's going on, so I apologize. I think that this is one of those very interesting projects that we maybe didn't think so clearly about when we were starting the RFP process and our thinking about how projects should be evaluated. This is the largest and most complex application that's come our direction. it's incredibly exciting and impactful, and it may not as seamlessly align with our original thinking about projects and how to evaluate them. And I would hate to see a powerful and comprehensive project impacted in a negative way because we haven't talked exactly about projects like this. So I just wanted to put that on the table, that I think that 110 units is going to be incredibly impactful, I think, for the neighborhoods that it's going to be seated in. Also, that really gives us a new resource as a community. The longer levels of affordability also are exciting. Yes, it's a larger project. Yes, it's been able to garner more funds than we maybe have seen in other projects. But I would hate to penalize a project because maybe it just isn't fitting the paradigms that we originally discussed.
I agree with what Adrian is saying. I share that same sentiment. I do have a question as to whether or not we have a quorum right now. I think we need 5 of the 9.
Is it 5?
Yes.
Okay, so we do not then. I wasn't certain if it was 4 or 5. So we're going to pause real quick to just talk about that. How does the advisory board want us to handle this? We could table these until next month. That's an option. We could also possibly do a phone. Afterwards, I can have Gloria poll the members that were not here.
Could we possibly hold the vote in hopes that Mr. Lane would be available by the end of this meeting to maybe come and cast a vote?
Yes.
All right, and we can move to the next agenda item. That way, if we can get it done this meeting, then we don't have to go through that.
Yes.
All right.
I think one thing that might help is if we make the recommendation and make it contingent on there being this 99-year affordability, because I think that's the real benefit, that this Opportunity Fund is adding to the project. So, and I know that we haven't vetted that by all the funding sources.
Okay, so you're saying you want to make it contingent that it is recorded as 99-year deed restriction on those properties.
And then the other funding sources might also be respectful of that as well. Let me take that into consideration.
Okay. Are there any other thoughts, comments, additional contingencies people would like to see? Okay, so we will table temporarily in hopes that we get a 5th voting member. Let's move on to the next RGP. We will go ahead and discuss that and table that one as well until we get a voting member.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so our second RGP project before the advisory board today comes from Hazelwood. It's the Hazelwood Initiatives project. It's called the Hazelwood Affordable Rental Preservation Program. So this is actually a scattered site project throughout Hazelwood in Council District 5. This is a 3-phase, multi-year affordable rental preservation strategy in Hazelwood that's being spearheaded by Hazelwood Initiatives. So the project is basically the largest landlord in Hazelwood. His name's David Cunningham. He is a lifetime resident of the neighborhood, of surrounding neighborhoods, and has, over his career, purchased 63 rental units, most of which are rented at affordable rates right now. He's looking to retire and has been receiving offers for his portfolio from out-of-town investors as well as investors in Pittsburgh, and Hazelwood Initiative has actually come to an agreement with him to purchase his entire portfolio with the intentions of renting it affordably for an extended amount of time, preserving that affordability that's currently there in Hazelwood. So this is the transfer of the first 22 units is what they're calling phase one. And that's what this loan that is before us today is specifically going towards. Will fund activities related to phase one. The next two phases to transfer the remaining 41 units will take place over the next 30 months. Their agreement with Mr. Cunningham is sort of a three-phased agreement that clock starts when this first transaction goes through. So all of the 22 units will be rented affordably, but HOF funds will be tied to 17 of the affordable units. One of our motivations in doing that is that these are all currently occupied units, and we don't want to penalize those that are over income right now with having to move out because HOF funds put an income restriction on those units. So with that, HOF funds will be tied 5 units at 30% AMI and to 12 units at 50% AMI. And again, none of the current residents will be displaced. And if a tenant in one of these 17 units happens to be over income, by the time the transaction occurs, the unit has to be rented in accordance with the deed restriction once the unit is turned over. So again, we're very strongly stating that we're not displacing current residents that are in these units. 17 of the units are actually in excellent shape, good to excellent shape, and then another 5 will probably need some level of rehab like construction. So by and large, this deal is Hazelwood Initiative purchasing these units and then prolonging their affordability. The requested amount for this loan from Hazelwood Initiative was $419,000. The recommendation today is $400,000, $300,000 of which will be taken from the 30% set aside and $100,000 from our 50% set aside. The interest rate here would be 0%, and the term of the year would be, or the term of the loan would be for 35 years. This would actually be a amortizing loan that right now we have set for 35 years with Hazelwood Initiative. However, we're willing to revisit that upon the refinancing of the deal as they go through phases 2 and 3 in the next 30 or so months. It's possible that if they're able to get additional funding sources, that we could lower the amount of years that it takes that the loan will amortize for. So HOF will have subordinate lien position on these properties located throughout Hazelwood. The affordability period would be for 35 years, and our instrument of affordability would be through deed restrictions. The total project costs are a little bit over $2 million. The financing for review today from HOF is $400,000. Other financing sources, they're going to have a first mortgage from a bank to purchase these 22, but then there's also been a very sizable contribution from the philanthropy community in Pittsburgh to help kind of close their gap and bring their total financing to a little bit above $2 million to complete that project. Looking at the uses of funds, the major cost here is the acquisition and taxes and fees related to the acquisition of these 22 units. Most are in very good shape, so there's actually only about $100,000, $110,000 that's budgeted as of right now for construction activities. So the reason for this HOF request is that this project preserves affordability, affordable units, which is a main tenet of the RGP program. It's compliant with the guidelines, and we think furthers the mission of this program. The supportive services that Hazelwood Initiative plans to provide they're hoping to bring circles of greater Pittsburgh to Hazelwood to allow residents to participate in their programs, which are mainly focused on fostering economic empowerment and stability. They have, I believe they're in somewhat early talks with Circles, but that's the plan for, one of the plans for how they'll support the residents of these units as well as Greater Hazelwood. But what's also notable is that Hazelwood Initiative currently works with Hazelwood residents to prepare them for home ownership. They have a pretty active rehab for resale program going on in the neighborhood. So they would probably, or they intend to work with the residents of these units to help to eventually move them into home ownership if that's a path forward that they would like to take. So the economic stability that is provided by having affordable rental living options for residents would hopefully then allow for more of those residents to move into home ownership in the community that they live in now. So we also see that as a supportive service in some ways. So I do want to make a correction on the MWBE section of this. This packet was written and says that their costs don't trigger URA oversight, but after some discussion with our MWBE officers, although the lion's share of the project budget is taken up by acquisition costs, the fact that it's a $2 million project overall will require that an MWBE plan be submitted and approved. So I want to make that correction to the packet. But and then just speaking to the project benefit a little bit, Hazelwood, the residents of Hazelwood have been working with the Department of City Planning for the last year and a half to create a neighborhood plan, and in their draft plan, one of their highest priorities coming from the residents was that future development doesn't come at the expense of displacing current residents. And we see this type of project, this preservation of these affordable units, quality affordable units in Hazelwood, as an effective strategy at sort of accomplishing that goal and addressing that concern that the residents have in the neighborhood. Just looking a little bit at how their scoring went, how they scored, it was very much so in line with other projects that we've seen come through the rental gap program in this first year. They scored very highly on their readiness to proceed. The sales agreement that they have with this owner requires that they move swiftly on the transaction, and they're certainly working diligently to secure all of that financing that is required to do so. The capacity of the development team is also scored 15 out of 15 points. We believe that Hazelwood Initiative will certainly be a responsible steward of these units and ensure that during the 35 years that they are slated to be affordable, they'll be quality maintained units for the residents of Hazelwood. Supportive services, they've received 5 out of 10 points only because it's the agreement with Circles at this point, as conveyed in the application, was it's their intention to. There wasn't a specific budget that was laid out, but moving on to policy objectives, they scored 5 out of 5 points in their geographic diversity. We haven't seen a project in Hazelwood yet, and we're very excited to see one, and one that sort of preserves existing housing stock, that if this type of investment and care was not put forth for these units, they would possibly fall into disrepair over that 35-year period that we're talking about from here on out. As far as how they scored with other P4 metrics, being that it's existing housing, they're not working with a blank slate. They didn't score perfectly on P4. They got 8 out of 10 points on the housing metric, 4 out of 10 points on the connect metric. That's somewhat out of their control with just the amenities that are currently available in Hazelwood. We're hoping that these over time that will improve, and they scored 10 out of 10 points in additional P4 categories, for their sizable amount of non-public financing, taking on housing that is considerably aged, and making sure that we preserve those types of buildings in our city. The majority of the project is in a certified redevelopment area, and they're also taking on privately owned land. So we have Dave Bruton from Hazelwood Initiative here, and for the record, Sonia Tillman, the executive director of Hazelwood Initiative, is a board member of the Housing Opportunity Fund. So
And
is
she
also
has abstained.
Yeah, and has abstained. But that's all that we have, or I have, as far as the materials go. Dave, if you want to come and say a few words, or if there's any questions from the advisory board, I'll open it up.
Thank you to all of you for your consideration of the project. All of us in Hazelwood are pretty excited about not just this phase, but the opportunity of this to get 63 units under control. We are really committed to the goal of development without displacement. And we think this is a great first step, along with the tax credit units we hope to do at Gladstone School, and our continuing work to help Hazelwood renters become homeowners through our Rehab for Resale program. It's exciting to be a part of the solution. And if you have any questions about the details of the deal, I'm happy to entertain them.
What's the funding status, commitment status of the other sources?
It's all in hand.
Well, you're still working with a lender.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. There's because of the deed restrictions, we had seller financing lined up for the next 30 months on so we were going to do that while we waited for the other two phases, and we determined it would be better if we went ahead and got the permanent financing now. That's why it's late in the game. But we're in touch with Bridgeway Capital and one local bank, and both seem very, very interested in doing the deal.
What's the barrier to the deed restriction not being longer? You said 35 years, right?
35 years.
Okay. So what's the barrier to that not being longer?
The owner was concerned. The owner was concerned, and I want to say that the owner has been a very good partner in this deal in terms of seeing it as a legacy to the community he grew up in. But he was concerned in the worst case scenario that if we couldn't complete the entire phases and he were in a position to foreclose, he would get the properties back with a deed restriction that he was not willing to honor. There's an additional one that we are also, I think it was mentioned by Evan, that we are applying for some extra rehab funds to the Federal Home Loan Bank, and they also have a restriction that we really needed to remove his financing from. So it's not just you.
Okay.
Hey, Dave, 17 of the 22 units are in good shape. Are residents in all of them now, or the tenants?
All the units are currently occupied.
So what's going to happen to the 5 units that need levels of repair and updating? Are the units?
Yeah, I think as we've continued to inspect them in connection with our Federal Home Loan Bank proposal, I think those numbers are a little off, and one of them said that the other 17 need nothing. We're looking now at a total rehab budget, also using really market competitive prices rather than work that we were going to do through the existing owner. At any rate, it's more like eight of them need, $30,000 or more, and the other ones can get by with one needs $500, one needs $2,000. They're all very low amounts.
So my question is about the types of repairs for the ones that need more, where the residents will be able to be in the units while you're doing those repairs? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
The larger ones, we're working right now on a strategy where one family is getting ready, we believe, to pursue home ownership, and so that would create a vacant unit. Another one, prior to the purchase, may be evicted due to lack of payment of rent. So we may have 1 to 2 units that we can use to cycle people through if necessary.
Are there any other questions for Dave?
No, not for Dave. I just want to say that I mentioned before that I'll abstain from any vote on the rental gap funding or program because, which is my understanding, legally there's a concern. So that's all. So for me, I'm going to abstain. So I'm sure Majestic's on his way is what I heard. Understand, right? So we'll wait. Can we?
I also heard another beep. Did somebody else get on the phone?
Adrian said, let her know when we're voting.
Oh.
She can't. She got
Okay.
dropped.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Dave. If there are no other questions, we will tentatively table this one as well until we have a fifth voting member.
Question, are you guys going to manage the properties yourselves? And if so, what property management experience do you have?
We are not going to manage them ourselves. During the next 24 months, the previous owner will continue to manage them under our direction. We will meet monthly and get regular reports. Beyond that, once then we own all 63 units, we will make a decision as to whether to continue him on, or to find a professional property management company. Not our job. They will do that, of course, under our direction so that our mission goals are balanced with the need to collect rent and maintain the properties.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bowe, did you need to say something?
Sorry to come back up, but I would like for Mr. Coffey to join me. We would like to just address the chair for a second. The motion was made in terms of subjecting the property to a deed restriction for 99 years. Maypoint, as a developer, we had an agreement with a 99 years affordability, but I think that we may have a legal issue with PHFA and the other funders that we cannot agree on their behalf to say we will restrict the deed to 99 years from the beginning. So how can I speak to that? The other issue I just wanted to bring to your attention is that the project is scheduled for financial closing on September 12th. So anything the HOF board can do to help us to meet that deadline, we appreciate.
Sure. Just to be clear, on the issue of the 99-year affordability period, again, that's a goal of this development, but for our funders involved in it to put something on there that's a requirement without any kind of carve-out for funding approval, which is what we had sought as part of the application, could be a significant issue. What we do have with PHFA is 40 years of affordability requirements, and we would look for the requirement to be piggybacking on PHFA's affordability period, and then the goal of extending it out for 99 years upon approval of all funders to the development. So to make the deed restriction that it has to be 99-year affordability period, I can't imagine is going to be approved by all funders.
What was the funding carve-out statement? I didn't understand that.
Certainly. So for affordability period, for it to mirror PHFA's, which is a 40-year affordability period, we would happily seek to make this a 99-year affordability period, but it would have to be to the approval of all the funders, which is what we were seeking as part of the application process. I just want to make that clear, that it's not we're saying that we would accept 99-year affordability period full stop, because if that doesn't meet with other funders' requirements for the deal, then it's a poison pill.
Did you say PHFA is 40 years, not 35?
Well, it's the 30-year affordability period for the tax credits, then an additional 3 years of reporting requirements. It's my understanding that through other parts of this, it would be up to about 40 years, but we would look for it to mirror what PHFA's requirements are.
So we could still make it contingent, but they may not get the money, essentially.
I mean, it's up to the advisory board how you want to handle that. And also, I want the advisory board to be comfortable with the deals and the contingencies. I would not let the timeline drive you because a deal like this is very complex to close and could be a couple months before closing. So I want the advisory board to think about that and do what they need, they feel comfortable with.
I would do understand that the other funders might not approve. If that's on there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Councilwoman Kell Smith came in, and Majestic Lane. Councilwoman's already stated that she needs to abstain for these items, but it looks like we now have 5 members. Adrian, are you back on the phone?
I can tell her.
Okay, Joanna is texting Adrian. As soon as we get Adrian back on the phone, we will be able to move forward for at least a discussion of a vote as to how the advisory board wants to vote on these 2 rental gap program items. Thanks.
That is city council rule, the legal part of it.
While we are waiting for Adrian to get on, just because I recognize we have 30 more minutes, I'll just do a couple of really quick updates. So everyone has noticed we have struggled today with a quorum. I will give some updates as to why that is and what will be happening in the near future. This advisory board is supposed to be a 17-person advisory board.
Back.
Adrian, are you back? Okay, table what I was going to say. Moving back to Adrian. Thank you, Adrian, for being on the call. We now have, counting you, we now have 5 voting members. Majestic Lane has joined us. So I go back to these 2 RGP items. If you look at your agenda, D, I pass it over to the advisory board if anyone would like to make any recommendations.
I just want to say, if we do put that requirement, it could make it more likely that the other funders would approve the 99 years. I mean, it seems like a great project, but I just think that would really make it a great investment.
What is PHFA's term of affordability on this?
They are 35 years plus, Hal was saying. There are a couple additional years of compliance.
So could we not follow PHFA's footprint and at the same time ask staff to talk about a 99-year restriction should other funders be comfortable with that stipulation? I mean, I'm just asking if that's...
We can word the resolution, however, the advisory board would like.
Because we got 35 years to get the other...
We're gonna run into this with every project that has a PHFA.
I mean, from a staff side, I'm more than willing to talk to PHFA staff and understand, what if they have concerns and what those are. I suspect it's more than PHFA, that there's also the group that's purchasing the tax credits themselves and some of the other participants in the deal, but I'm more than welcome to have conversations.
Yeah, because with a deal this complex, it's very hard to take our desired intent and to try to make that retroactive to other funders. It's usually the other way around. It's that if other folks are in play, if we're the only ones at the table, then our restriction makes sense. But once there are other factors involved, I think we've got to evaluate what that means. And so I certainly love to see a 99-year deed restriction, but I really want to see affordability in Uptown adjacent to the Lower Hill when it comes to the central part of the neighborhood.
Is there a right of first refusal or something for the Hill, for the Hill CDC, or something that would help guarantee more of a long-term affordable mission? Because I know a lot of times investors are willing to sell to their... Are they a general partner, any part of the partnership? Okay.
Sorry, for the record, the Hill CDC is not a part of the general partnership.
With let's say we were to move forward, how close to closing or how close to getting all the financing would this deal be?
This project, we've been working on it for at least a couple of years. Thank you very much for joining us. Financial closing is scheduled for September 12th, but no later than September 30th because of the City Council just approved a resolution on the 30th that sets a 60-day deadline for us to close.
We are confirming that with other lenders. Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency made this award of tax credits last month, and in July, the second Thursday of July. They do have some due diligence to get to closing, as do some of the other lenders. So Nate, I mean, I understand the goal is September, but I would not want that date to rush the committee if the committee needs to review.
So like,
this.
is this last in, or I'm just trying to get an understanding of where this last piece of funding exists within the pro form and the capital staff?
So there is a whole team at the URA reviewing these funding sources right now, from several different departments, and there are a few last pieces that are being finalized. They're related to the Federal Home Loan Bank's application is due next week, I think. So that is not in.
The application is due next week, but the way the deal is structured is that Maypoint is deferring developer fee to cover the Federal Home Loan Bank application. So it is a technicality, but yes, the answer to your question is this is the last piece for us to get the financial closing.
So for me, I think, generally, obviously, we're supportive of this kind of thing happening, but I think, the URA's due diligence and making sure that everything is in play and that this is last money in, and there's also conversation with PHFA around their 40-year rule, or 99, and then how does that play in, and does that make this not able to happen, which to Director Walker's point, then means we don't have this affordable housing in this particular space that is close.
That was the earlier conversation, and that was the earlier conversation, and the value add of us coming in was to extend that affordability, which now we don't have that ability. And so here's a team that has the savvy to raise $62 million without us, that takes 10% of our budget to make it happen.
I want to get clarity on when we say they have $62 million without us. My understanding is that this funding is critical to the project beyond the 99 years. I think that we're making a really, it's very complex, so it's very quick to say that, but I think that the funding is essentially needed to advance affordable housing. One of the added benefits could have been a 99-year deed restriction, but we're subject to the stipulations of so many other funders. That may not be feasible. What we have the opportunity to get here is at least 35 years of affordability, with the URA staff having the ability to talk about on the back end how we might be able to extend that once there's actually a deal there. So I just want to make sure that this is very complicated, very difficult to talk about, but I want to make sure we're not conflating a bunch of things together. We have the opportunity to do 35 years of affordable housing in a neighborhood where people will not get into this neighborhood 36 months from now.
I think that the question is whether this project would happen without us. I think it will. I think they probably have to take on a little more debt. I don't know how much, if the project can withstand that $1 million deferred fee, $1 million opportunity fund. Developers need to get paid, no doubt. But I don't think that housing's not going to be there necessarily without our investment. I think 35 years is going to go by quickly. I mean, I've been told by others who are older than me that is the case.
So I will say, for context, $1 million over 35 years as far as an investment is approximately $36,000 a year to ensure affordability for 77 income restricted units.
Right.
So I do think we should put it in context of the investment and what people will actually get for that investment.
And I think we need to pay attention to the neighborhood that this is happening in. When we talk about neighborhood change, we talk about gentrification, and we are always too late to the battlefield to try to abate some of this stuff. So I don't want to harangue over $1 million versus it's a $62 million project that's going to create an equitable living state for people who otherwise would not have this opportunity. And I think that is our mission. This could easily be a completely market rate deal. That's feasible. That could happen. It could make it a lot easier. What I think the team is trying to do here is to create some level of affordability. So when we say that we want affordable housing for all in this city, we don't just talk about it, we do it. So that's my statement on the record. And I'm here for the nonprofit central area, and I do not want us to be too quick to not think about what's happening in the Hill District, what's happening in Uptown, and harangue over $1 million.
this is gonna happen without us. And we could put that million somewhere else and leverage more stuff.
I don't agree with that. I don't agree
Well,
that
you,
it's gonna
you
happen.
can't be assured you would get those units over time. And once again, when you look at the
Not over
depreciation.
time, but like, they're gonna do this deal without us. I
Well-
mean, our,
But I think our sole calculus is not whether or not the deal can happen without us. That's one of the metrics that we look at. That's not a one-trick pony. We also have to look at neighborhood impact and the headwinds that are happening in the city's economy with the Lower Hill happening. How else do we get these affordable units adjacent to jobs and major mobility projects? We also have to think about the BRT. We have to think about the Eco-Innovation District. Do we want low-income residents adjacent to those opportunities, or don't we?
of course we do. Okay. No debate on that point.
Does somebody want to move a resolution?
I mean, I'm not necessarily, I would need more information. I'm not prepared to say move the resolution. I would need to, more information from the URA in regard to PHFA and, what could happen or what should happen. That's me.
I'm wondering if our resolution can be contingent upon all of those other things falling into place, and should those things not fall into place, we have to come back to the table and revisit the intended allocation. I'm asking you, Jessica, whether or not.
Yes, I mean, we can, if the advisory board would like to make a resolution today with contingencies, and then if those don't fall through, then we would need to bring it back. We could do that. I also, at the beginning, when we first started discussing this, I also stated that the URA, because this is so complex and it crosses lots of departments of the URA, a bunch of staff are looking at this. Don't forget that every decision made here does go to the URA as a governing board. And if there are, appears to be, funding gaps, then it would be held and not go to the URA board for another month.
Okay. And I just want to clarify too, the reason I'm abstaining is because I requested information from the law department, whether or not it was, there was any legal concerns regarding the rental gap, and they have not given me a written response yet. I've had verbal conversation, never a written response. So for that reason, I'm abstaining. I don't want to say that there's definitely something, because if there was something to be concerned about, it'd stop everybody from voting on it. So
Okay.
I don't think that, I don't know that there is. So I just want to make sure I say that.
Okay.
So we're saying we're gonna review the 99-year contingency with the PHFA.
Yeah, if you want to add that as a contingency, I think the wording would be something like request for 99-year, or if funders cannot get their head wrapped around that it then comes back to the advisory board. Do you want to do it that way?
Yep.
Say that again? Let me wrap my head around that.
So I think whoever says it eventually would read a couple contingencies as listed on the agenda, which are for financing, and that the financing be completely committed prior to moving forward, and also that there be no outstanding litigation on the land. And then thirdly, what I think I'm hearing from Joanna is that there also be the recommendation that there either be a 99-year deed restriction put on, or that it comes back in front of the advisory board.
All of that in a motion.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I can motion.
So Joanna motions. I need a second.
Second.
Majestic. All those in favor?
Aye.
Abstain.
Okay. Motion with
Adrian
those.
on the phone with ayes.
Adrian, I motion with those three sort of contingencies. Seems like it has been moved, and we will make sure when we get the minutes drafted that all three of those contingencies are on there. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye to the group.
Wait. Adrian, Hazelwood, really fast. Does somebody have a motion for Hazelwood?
Motion to approve.
And a
second that.
contingent on financing. And also for both of these, they expired December 1st.
Okay.
So that all needs to be in the motion. Diamante motioned, Jamil seconds. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
Aye. Adrian on the phone.
Okay, thank you, Adrian.
Abstain.
You can go now.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. Okay, everyone else back to the table. Thank you. Okay, and I know we are at 11:15, and we lose some of you at 11. So it looks like, let's just go quickly through some of these other items. F, discussion of 2020 allocation plan process. So here we are again. In accordance with the legislation, every year, as everyone knows, we started in the summer last year. That put us kind of halfway in a cycle, so we've been kind of going quickly through these allocation plan processes to get caught up. So now to stay caught up, we need to take the 2020 allocation plan to the URA board and in October so that it is introduced and approved by council by the end of the year, and that is in accordance with the legislation. So we are going to need to go back out to the public meetings. A lot of you know that not in official conjunction with the URA, but Pittsburgh United is in the process of doing a series of meetings where they have been into communities. I think they're in Knoxville tonight, I think. Yeah. And have gotten amazing attendance, 150 people per meeting attendance. So in light of the fact that there has been a lot of meetings regarding HOF, our proposal would be in September to maybe do 2 or 3 meetings specific to feedback on 2018, 2019, and giving the public opportunity to comment on what they would like to see in 2020. We spent a lot of time looking at the map of this is a map showing where the 2018 and 2019 official allocation plan meetings are, and then where the Pittsburgh United in green, where they're currently meeting with folks right now, and try to figure out where geographically. So our suggestion would be to have one in the central, and then maybe in the north and south, and then the next round go east and west in a similar fashion to how the city does their capital budget hearings. But I'm opening up for anybody's feedback. And would like to also say that doesn't mean that we're not out in these neighborhoods for other meetings as well. But just in terms of an expedited process, we don't want to, I think, confuse the public by a series of meetings that are happening right now, and then another series, and people not understand the difference.
Did you say that this follows the city's capital budget meetings, that their footprint is
Well,
sort of
they
the same?
usually do a north and south one year and a east and west the following year is typically how they handle it.
And we're proposing to do north, south, and west?
I mean, we can go wherever the advisory board. Our proposal would be, just because there are 6 meetings going on with Pittsburgh United, to keep it to 2 or 3 meetings. If we hit the central, we either need to go north and south or east and west. I open it up to committee to how they want to handle that.
I just say every time when I worked for Pittsburgh Public Schools, everything we did was north, south, east, west, and central. We just made sure we always covered meetings that way. But I really appreciate the meetings that you guys have been going to and that Pittsburgh United has been organizing.
I like the more micro level engagements at the neighborhood level. I think that's very impactful. I also liked the city's capital budget footprint. So if we could look at that as maybe a way to navigate and make sure that we are leveraging all of our resources to get the word out and get folks in those meetings, that could help.
I think it's unfortunate how scrunched up all these
I know.
allocation plans are, because we don't have anything to give the public in terms of, this is what we learned from implementing. I mean, we have something.
Right.
We're starting to get results, but
Yeah, so speaking of that, it's cutting it close, but we would like to kind of postpone these until the second half of September for that very reason, because we are now, they're starting to crank out. The HSPs and the HAPs are really starting to crank out, and we will have a lot more data to show folks at the end of September. If we do that, though, that will mean the advisory board will need to kind of approve the allocation plan at the October meeting without a preliminary plan in September. So is everyone comfortable with that? Okay. Okay. So to get to a preliminary plan, we have to have a preliminary plan here the first week of September, and then a final vote in October, which would almost mean using the Pittsburgh United meetings that they're running now in part as part of the process. Go ahead, Majestic.
Well, no, so I just think we got to choose. We have to choose what bullet we want to bite. So if we want it to go longer, so it may go longer than what the legislation says. And if that's what if people are comfortable with that, then that's what it is. If we're not comfortable with that, and remember when the legislation was written, it was done because everyone wanted it moved fast and get back on track. So I think we need to make a decision as a collective. Are we okay with the information we have now and we'll have by the first week, by September, or do we want a month to do a preliminary, discuss it, and then it may not happen until October or November?
Or since we just decided the 2019, can we use that as our preliminary, get feedback on it, and adjust that?
I mean, that's up for you to discuss.
What's the downside of waiting? I mean, if we're outside of the legislation.
I mean, no, to Jessica's credit, she's been very just specific about making sure things are done according to the legislation, which was the original idea of kind of what folks thought was important at that juncture. We're back at that juncture where we wanted it condensed in order to get the money out and get back on time, on schedule. So this is what it requires. So it requires either we could take another month. I mean, as administration, we don't have a problem with that. But like I said, to Jessica's credit, she wants to make sure that the entire board is okay with that, if that is the case.
I mean, if we did do an October preliminary and a November URA board, we could still try to get approved by council by the end of the calendar year.
Mm-hmm.
That would buy us a month.
Fair to the public.
Yeah, I agree. That's probably fair.
I think that's more fair to the public, even though the legislation, because the legislation we didn't know that we would be 7 months behind from the onset.
Okay, right.
Even if it didn't get to the council in December, we're really talking about January, it will be there, and it's going to take several months. Even if we got it done by the end of the year, it's going to take several months for the city and the URA to get the funds under contract, and about legally being able to fund projects. Right. I'm not sure in a practical way it's going to have much of an impact on when the money actually gets out at this point.
Okay, so that sounds like that'll be our goal, is October preliminary, November URA board. We'll revisit it next month, and next month we will announce the location of the public meetings. Okay. All right, thanks. Okay, moving on to the discussion of the nominating committee chair and vice chair. So we pulled out the minutes from a couple months ago when we talked about this, and recognizing that we are about, I think, 5 people short on the advisory board right now. There were 4 of the empty seats were presented at City Council last week. Those folks will be interviewed by council when council comes back from recess. So they will probably, if they are approved by council, they'll be approved sometime in September. So the new folks will probably be here in October. In the meantime, in order to stay on schedule with what we discussed a couple months ago for the identification of a chair and a vice chair of the advisory board, I met via conference call with the governing / marketing committee for the advisory board, and they recommended that we go forth today with nominations for a nominating committee, who will then in turn nominate a chair. And I would ask someone who was on that marketing committee if they could kind of take over this conversation at this point. Mark?
Yeah, what we wanted to do, and I think the advisory board talked about this at a previous meeting, is to be able to have a chair in place in September, I think was what we were targeting. So the idea behind the nominating committee would be to review kind of the qualifications and have basically a job description, and then find folks from the advisory board that would be willing to serve as chair or vice chair. I think for the nominating committee, if folks are interested in that, it might be best if you're not on the nominating committee, but you might just change your mind too. So I think what we need to do now is to get volunteers or to and appoint a nominating committee.
I apologize, but I actually think that this should be an open discussion and that other people, so people can hear it. One of the reasons I wanted these meetings televised is so that the public knows what's going on. And so I've noticed that we've had like emails taking votes and doing things like that. Now we're talking about having another committee. I just think those are all ways to avoid the public, and I don't like it. I mean, to be honest, I think all these things should be part of the public knowledge. So I'm just going to say that part. You can do.
What would be your recommendation?
I don't know why we're not having a conversation about it publicly. Like, you know, what is it we want to do? I think we should have a board in place. I think that's part. I know I have somebody coming on board for the West End who's not here yet. I think that there's somebody who wants to be on, and I just had some sidebar conversations about why that person's not been appointed. So I think that it's important to have a board that's going to be in place before we start deciding who's going to be the chair. That's all.
Okay.
And that was the goal of the nominating committee. My recollection was that we said that we didn't want to nominate a chair or a vice chair until we have full capacity on the board.
Well, we had that discussion at the nominating committee, but it was also had right here in public and on the governance committee, but also right here in front of the cameras about.
So you formed a committee to have the conversation.
No, we
formed a committee to talk about the path, and that the committee met before a smaller group to talk about what the recommendation could be to the larger board. And one of the recommendations was not to nominate a chair until we have a full board.
So we can have the conversation.
Well, but the whole board had that conversation 2 months ago to say, yes, we would like to do that, but also there was a deadline that the board voted for September.
So maybe we should make a motion to extend the deadline until the board is complete.
You talked about creating a nominating committee. I don't think it's to be out of the public's eye as much as to get work done. Sometimes we only have so much time to meet in this
I know,
meeting.
but you know, I've been around for this job and in the public jobs and for a long time, and I know that there's also ways to avoid the public, and that's by forming committees and doing those kinds of things. And I get that sometimes you have to do those things. I do understand that, but I do think that the most concern I have is that we're talking about a chairperson for a board that's not really even in place for the following year. I mean, we know that there's going to be changes. I have somebody coming on. I think we have 4 interviews this week for.
Is council then going to move before there?
So we're on vacation. So, so it's not going to happen until September or so.
Yeah, the final council vote. Councilwoman, please correct me if I'm wrong here. Will probably happen after the first Thursday of September, right?
Right.
But to me, I feel like we're on the timeline that we talked about in both the committee and the recommendation that was made to the advisory board, which was to have the board at full capacity for the October meeting to start having real discussions about the chair. So I think that we're.
I think it
within
was
the
There
window.
was a committee. I think it was technically the marketing committee, but most of the people overlapped. That's
what I'm missing.
That talked like a week ago about wanting to stay on the schedule. However, I'm hearing that I think I heard a nomination that we extend that deadline until we get new members. So I don't know if you want to make a formal
motion to extend the deadline until the new members are in place.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
I have a question. Is that we're extending the creation of a nominating committee or the setting of a chair?
I think
you don't even want to have a nominating
we're
committee.
postponing the creation of a nominating committee. Actually, I don't want to put words in your mouth. Go ahead.
So extending the nominating committee until we have a board in place that's going to be serving. I think it's only fair. I mean, I wouldn't want somebody picking for me who was going to be my council president when I was, coming on board and I wasn't here.
But that means that we have a full committee of 17, or just until the next 4 folks that you're interviewing?
Let that discussion take place once we have the board in place.
But we have a chair that's not a member of the committee. it's also important that somebody from sitting around has gone through that process is the chair and a vice chair, instead of staff people chairing.
And I agree with that. I think it's
I
critical.
I don't agree with that. I'm just
I mean,
gonna say
I
right now.
agree that it's critical that we have a chair, but I think it's more critical that we have all voices weigh in on who that person should be. So if it's a timing
Exactly.
issue, we need to wait.
But do we have?
And can I say something else? None of you are responsible to the public, but public employees are. And so while you're talking and having this conversation, how great it will be to be independent, and I do like the independency, and I mean, that's one of the reasons I had concerns with a lot of people serving on this board that are currently serving on the board, because there's a lot, we had half the people go into the audience because they couldn't take a vote. So yeah, I do have concerns with some of that stuff. But at the same time, I know she's going to be accountable to the public because she has a boss that's accountable to the public. I know that and these folks here are accountable to the public. To me, that accountability means a lot. So I just want to say that part. So, I mean, when we talk about independence, accountability is also equally important.
Just a note. The folks that are in front of council right now, I think there are 3 or 4 of them, but once if they are approved by council, I think we are up to 15 at that point. There are still 2 slots that will be open.
We're counting the 15 as being full. I mean,
I think even that conversation has, I mean, what is the makeup of this board? I mean, should we have somebody from Fair Housing on here? Should we have people that, I mean, definitely North, South, East, West, Central, definitely. Should we have people that have some, because even though you all have some conflict of interest, we had to sit out, many of you, you also add a lot to the table because you are housing advocates. So there's, I mean, I think that the whole makeup of the board needs discussed a little bit.
I'm hired and fired by my neighbors, so I have some public
who do you work with?
a membership organization.
So I think you just approved
Sonia.
Teresa's motion, Councilwoman's motion to wait until we have at least this next 3 or 4 people approved by council.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Okay, so I know we are at 11 o'clock. Does anybody have time or want to stay to discuss some of the current status, or should we postpone this until next month?
I need to go.
Okay, we can postpone until next month. Public comment really quickly?
Sorry, Jessica, I have a quick question about the folks who are being interviewed as potential advisory board members.
Yes.
Have they already fully disclosed their conflicts of interest?
No, so they will need to sign a policy the same that you did once they are.
And I think that process in place, having that before we actually confirm them, I think would help us in terms of deciding or figuring out how many votes we have for a particular program.
Okay. I mean, that's a great suggestion. Does others agree that they should disclose conflicts up front before being approved?
The best of their knowledge, yeah.
That's a great idea.
And then also, do we know which representatives or seats they'll be taking on the advisory board?
Yes, yeah, it was on the public council agenda last week. It's the Weston seat, the low and the tenant representative, and the housing authority. Was there one more? Was it just the 3?
No, it was those 3.
It was the 3 plus Mark's.
And Mark is being reconfirmed.
Confirmation. Yes.
I can tell you my nominee is Megan Winters. She's works for Senator Lindsey Williams, but she is a resident of Chartier City, and she was moved to my area because she was looking for affordable housing. So I thought the search that she went on and how she ended up in the West End was really interesting. I thought she'd be great to have somebody who actually went through the process. So
Great. And it wasn't council agenda. Knowledge Hutchin is the housing authority representative, and Ethel Johnson is the tenant representative. She's from the West End.
Is there a reason why the fair housing representative hasn't been brought forward yet, or?
So it's still conversations around that.
I didn't want to leave the updates without addressing what we heard at the initial public comments about, we have somebody that, apparently there's a difference of opinion about what sustainable life plan, or whatever we're calling it. I've heard several complaints from different parts of the community about that there isn't an apparent process to appeal a decision, a turn down. And I'm just curious, like, what happens when there's that sort of disagreement, and who's arbitrating that?
Yep, so real fast, and we have a couple slides on this, and might need staff to speak to this a little bit, but, so the Housing Stabilization Program opened up 4 weeks ago. Pittsburgh Mercy was the first provider. The groups needed to figure out how they were going to staff this program, and we were also training them, getting them on the HMIS system held at Department of Human Services, and also on our new SharePoint technology system, and teaching them how to log in information and get inspections done and so on and so forth. So they were the first group to start. Pittsburgh Urban League just started this week, as did YWCA. They are just now in the process of putting people in. And then Macedonia will start in a little bit. This is a pilot program. It is a learning curve. Bettina and Jamie just came up, and they can kind of go into the details of the number of folks that have been approved. What I will what I will emphasize is this is a pilot program, and due to the marketing that some of the folks in the room have done, and others, there's a humongous demand, and people are calling Pittsburgh Mercy specifically right and left, and they are approving at a pretty fast rate, and Jamie can go through that, but she will show you that at the rate people are getting approved, these funds are the first year of funds will be spent in 3 or 4 months. We have heard that people have asked, is there a process when people are turned down? We just opened. We didn't think about that. so now we're thinking about it, and we'll talk to the advisory board about an appeals committee, but do need to reemphasize that the advisory board approved program guidelines for this program, and there have been forms put in place that the providers are using in accordance with the program guidelines to make these determinations. Additionally, we're realizing that having 4 providers, we really would like, to the extent possible, of having the same providers looking at the same clients. And we also want to make sure clients that aren't eligible in accordance with our guidelines are getting referred to programs that they are eligible for. So we have been talking internally, and we've also talked to Pittsburgh United about having one door. I think that will help some of this confusion and help keep it from being like individual sort of decisions, but to have one front door, and if somebody doesn't fit the program parameters coming through the front door, then they are then identified, they are then recommended to programs that do fit their parameters. So we have talked to a couple of folks, including Allegheny County Link and the United Way, and we are having a further conversation with the United Way to serve as that front door. So between having that happen and then potentially some type of appeals committee, and Adrian got off the phone, but she has, we've talked to her a little bit about this as well, about helping us set that up. So I think those 2 things will help the situation. That was a mouthful. I'm sorry. Is there any questions based on that?
Yeah, we had somebody that took the time and took off work. Mm-hmm. She's working now, and that seems to be that's sustainable, that you've got a job and you're trying to stay. Yeah. I don't know the specifics, but what I do know is that when this is happening, waiting a month or 2 for us to get a process in place, somebody's going to lose their home. Yeah,
just real fast, that reminded me of something, and the URA attorney is not here right now, but I do have to say that as staff and also as advisory board members, and our attorney can come and talk about this in more detail next month, but we cannot talk about anybody's individual situations to the advisory board or to people outside of the URA. We cannot talk about it legally, so I do not want to go into
I'm not asking for somebody's social security number.
Legally, we are not allowed to talk about anybody's personal information at this table.
But my question is, has there been I guess my follow-up, has there been a conversation between the staff and Mercy to look at this application, the specifics that we've heard about today, to re-examine that?
It's a temporary thing, can the staff kind of reach out when that happens?
Pittsburgh Mercy has re-looked at it.
One thing also, you've asked the question about the sort of what exactly does this third criterion mean in terms of stability. We have been talking internally and with Adrian in particular, and I'm sorry that she's not on the phone, about coming up with a much more standardized definition for that. The original intent was to allow the service providers to sort of use their expertise to help make that determination. We're seeing, of course, and we're hearing from the public loud and clear that that's not the preference. So the crux of the issue, though, as far as we are able to to understand the program guidelines as they were set forth, is not, are you doing well enough? The question is about, is this subsidy deep enough to get you back on your feet in safe, decent, affordable housing in the long term?
So the original intent of this program, as outlined in the guidelines, is to provide assistance to a very specific group who have previously not been able to access assistance in the past. So we are identifying households who are in a crisis situation, but with these funds can allow them to not only stay in their unit, but stay there long term. Whereas there are other households who are, who have been served an eviction notice or a letter from the magistrate, and there are other deeper services available to these households that they can take advantage of, and they have far more resources available to them than HSP can provide. We do have a very limited amount of funds, unfortunately, and the demand for this program is huge. So the question I think that we have to ask ourselves is, are we going to allot these funds towards a specific population that has previously been excluded from assistance like this before, or are we going to contribute these funds to a larger system that's already being in place? Again, like we've heard from the public as well, that, the way the guidelines are written, a lot of the people who are calling and inquiring about the program has not been deemed eligible at the time that they're calling in. It does not mean that they are not eligible overall. Our service providers have outlined why they are not eligible at the time, and if possible, the steps they can take to become eligible, and then call back and apply for the program. But again, these funds are meant to not only allow the household to stay, but stay there long term, and that is the key part to this program.
Theoretically, until we have a front door, someone could apply to all four organizations and get different answers. I mean,
we do have some information management infrastructure in place, which would only catch them, unfortunately, after they've gone through a full appointment. So to Jessica's point, that single point of entry will help. But there is a way for us to catch that sort of mid-process.
But if I understood what you said, then if somebody's gotten assistance from some other program before, did I misunderstand that? That somebody's received assistance from CHS or someone else in the past, they wouldn't be eligible for HSP?
No,
they would still be eligible.
Okay.
Right. So we take a look at the entire picture. Our service providers are tasked with looking at their history as well as future forward in terms of what will allow them to stabilize. And now if they identify that there has been an issue in the past and a chronic issue that $3,000 worth of funds will not fix, we don't want to just prolong the trauma or delay the trauma. We want to address the trauma either before it happens or get the assistance needed that HSP cannot, unfortunately, provide to the household at that time. So I think it is important to note that, $3,000 can go a really long way, but for some applicants, it just is not enough to help stabilize them long term, and there are other issues that need to be addressed, and there are other services that need to be pulled in. And as Celeste said earlier, that a lot of these people who are calling in are in this traumatic situation, and we understand that. But we also ask ourselves, is this $3,000 going to help their trauma, or are we just delaying the inevitable if we don't address these underlying issues that have caused them to experience either these issues in the past or moving forward?
So we're losing everyone. Let's hear from, can we hear from our public?
I mean, do you want, public comments generally at the end.
I thought we called him up for the end.
Well, I called him up, I thought we were at the end.
Oh, okay.
I'd like to continue any conversation at the table and then go to public comment at the end if.
Okay.
Is there any other conversation at the table?
I got a long day.
No. Okay, public comment at the end. Celeste.
Okay, so I think you addressed some of my questions that I had about Sabrina Clark coming to address the advisory board, and I know we can't do like individually, but as a process, how are we addressing it? I know we had a conversation about having a separate review board, maybe akin to what the HEMAP program does around appeals, but probably having to be different. I know we talked about coordinated entry, which you talked about maybe being 211 or the United Way. I know we talked about the gray area on the flyer of what does actively working to stabilize mean, and that when folks are in this situation, sometimes one touch is all you're going to get. I'm getting calls from people in cars that want to know, does this qualify? I live in a car. So I know that you're going to maybe get this one touch where you tell people you're not approved now. These folks may never come back. So just trying to figure out how do we get this one touch with this person where they get the touch that they need and they understand. So just thinking about, I know there is another Housing Opportunity Fund staff position open. Will that position be possibly, I feel like we need a point person that is answering those questions, like I guess that would be coordinated entry, but what is the capacity of service providers and who should I be calling? And I didn't get a call in this amount of time. How long should I expect? I have people that have gotten eviction notices on their door in the interim. They don't know what to do. There's now a housing court. Is the Housing Opportunity, they came to our meeting, so they do have the Housing Opportunity Fund information, but do people know to call this housing court? And is it the latest, most up-to-date things? Also, people are asking me about walk-ins. Can there be a walk-in day for people that don't have access to maybe the internet and maybe need to walk in? I think that's everything. Just setting the expectations. We've been working with you on that. The Urban League, I spoke to them this morning because they may or may not come to the meeting, but they said they're getting people that that may think that they can do last month's security deposit in December because their lease is ending. So just making sure people have clear expectations that because people keep calling me because I don't know if I'm very charming or what it is, but people are like, I'm comfortable with you. They're calling 4 and 5 times maybe a week, which is okay with me. I want to make sure people navigate this process, but I also want to make sure that we have a process in place that whoever is getting this judgment call is making it from a view of, it's really hard to have a financial plan when you're in this situation. And if I call once and I'm disconcerted, I may not call back and you may lose me. And also, let's see. I think that's it. And also the fair housing position on the advisory board, we are definitely interested in who will be being seated for that. So I think I hit everything. Oh, and also just combating that scarcity narrative. We will be upon budget season. I know there was talk that this money wouldn't get spent from the HSP and the HAP, and now that it is, maybe there's a case to be made that we need more. And that's it.
Anyone else for public comment? Thanks, Celeste.
Hi. So first of all, I apologize if any of the questions.
Say your name, please.
Certainly, Jade Warren, the Executive Director and CEO of the Fair Housing Partnership. Again, I apologize to begin that I was a little late, so if what I asked has already happened, I'm sorry. Unfortunately, in the world of being the only qualified fair housing organization that serves in the city, when somebody faces discrimination, that kind of slows me down from time to time. Having said that, a couple of points I just want to make sure. You may recall from the last time I spoke in front of you, and I don't expect this to be a regular conversation, that I expressed that there are questions that should be asked as related to the fair housing concerns inside of our city as the leading fair housing advocacy agency. One of those questions was, how does a project impact segregation in our city? As such, you are looking at $1 million project, and so I ask up front, and it's unfortunately that we don't have everyone here, how will that impact segregation in our city? Did you discuss that? Was it reviewed? Was it brought up? And to be quite frank, I don't know. It may be a really great thing in the fact of preempting what would be a situation of segregation or concentration of race. It may not. But was it brought up? Was it discussed? Did someone ask it? If you didn't ask it, understanding that the last time I was here, I expressed to you the concerns and that there should be a fair housing advocate at the table, why wasn't that done? The same thing is true for the second project under the same concerns. And again, it may be really effective. It may actually help address the issue of segregation in our city. It may not. But the question remains, did the advisory committee ask the questions? Did you review it? And if not, why not? And if so, what were the outcomes? This brings me to another point that was brought up by more than one of your existing advisory and in fact by your public commenter. You know, where is the person at the table as related to your fair housing advocate? I want to take a couple quick seconds to address this, because for me this goes back all the way to the creation of this actual advisory committee. This goes back to the Affordable Housing Task Force. This goes back to the idea of what is the role of a fair housing advocate sitting at the table. Now, it was written with legislation, and I appreciate the way that it was written, that it says that there should be a fair housing advocate. Now, as it turns out, right, my organization, as I said before, is the only fair housing advocacy agency that's HUD qualified here in our city. In fact, so much so that we contract with the city to provide training, including training that we provided to the URA on fair housing. And yet the seat remained vacant. Now, I understand that fair housing can be a difficult thing, that it can slow down processes, that we ask questions. But I don't understand why this seat is vacant. So I started this process in the beginning saying, hey, just, you know, if we could just have someone at the table. At this point, I'm over that. I'm going to be more direct about this. I've been direct with members of City Council. I've been direct, quite frankly, with the URA when I had one of the assistant regional directors with me come and speak with the URA and the Housing Opportunity Fund on this issue. We, the Fair Housing Partnership, are the resident experts in this city on fair housing as an advocate. There are policy people, there are other folks, but when it comes to fair housing advocacy, we are it. So I haven't had any conversations as the CEO of this agency about who the fair housing advocate will be. No one's come, no one's called, no one's asked. So I ask you now, what is going on? Am I missing something? Right? Is there something I'm unaware of that we don't want to have this conversation? Is it that FHP is difficult because we ask the fair housing questions? I assume that in the upcoming month or so, that we will have this conversation and that a fair housing advocate, not a person who worked on fair housing policy, not somebody who was interested in fair housing as part of what they do, but an actual fair housing advocate will be at that table. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Rick Coleman. I came down here to set up a meeting thinking council was meeting on Tuesday. I own Rico Construction and also Floors of Dalton and in Dalton, Georgia. I'll just tell you, because it does concern the URA. Part of what I was doing down here, what I was going to do down here, fortunately, you're kind of lucky because 3 entities, KDKA, Channel 4, and the Trib were going to be here, but council's on vacation. I don't see any press here. At 5202 Dearborn Street in Garfield, a 68-year-old lady is taking care of a 7-year-old paraplegic. The URA promised her for 5 months they would come out and do the work. When I leave here, I'm going to go talk to Jardel. Now they want her son to come down and sign papers. This woman is taking care of a quadriplegic. She works. Her grandson came home twice in the past 5 weeks with black eyes from his mother's house in McKeesport. I called 911 the other day because there was a New York van parked in her handicap spot. I told them that there was drug activity associated with this van. They didn't come out for a couple days. Across from her next door neighbor and I started filling a hole in where the block caved in. The neighbors have been complaining about this for over a year. Mandela Park, 1 block away from her house, last week, because the water was shut off, and the city, the URA, you're all full of crap. They promised those kids a sprinkling system for the summer. I broke the water fountains to turn them on last week. I took 2 garbage cans down there. The city removed them. There's access and egress 3 points at Mandela Park. It's a shame. The guy asked you a question about fair housing. You don't have an answer for him the second time around. You tell this other gentleman that you can't bring somebody's complaint up. By whose authority can't you bring a complaint up? The reason why you didn't get an answer, take a look at the faces. 1, 2, 3, 4 females. White, 1, 2, 3. Had you been talking to 3 black, you would have got a response. But see, that's the indifference, the apathy in the city. I was one of the builders of 1000 Grandview, down from Lamont. They always show shots of the building hanging over the mountain. It's just a 90-degree angle. It's been done for hundreds of years. Up on the corner from where this lady lives, when she goes shopping at Aldi's, who you provided funds for, the cart stops right at the edge of their parking lot. The old people in Garfield have to take their groceries, go across the street to Family Dollar, because Family Dollar allows them to take the carts home. Right there, now you can go down 1 block if you need to catch a bus to right in front of Bloomfield Garfield Association, or you can go up to McCabe's in St. Lawrence and catch a bus. There should be a bus stop right there. Why in God's name Pat doesn't put one there? But again, this is the apathy of the URA, the city of Pittsburgh, and this inept Zappella. It's funny, I wonder how many junkets are going on right now with Consul that are being provided for by UPMC and like Home Depot. I asked Home Depot, I didn't even give them a number. I asked them if they could help contribute, because I do a lot of volunteer work, some toilets and sinks. So I went and had a meeting with their managers from Youngstown, Ohio. So I told them, if you don't help me out, the city put a lot of money in here. Just like I told Aldi's. The same thing. The city put a lot of money in with both of you. I told Aldi's to contact Home Depot. I said, Floors of Dalton, we're going to open up against you.
Sir, I hate to interrupt you, but we're well over the 3-minute public.
Yeah, he spoke for 10 minutes. I timed him.
Okay, can you
wrap
up in the next minute or two?
Would you rather have KDKA interview you and Marcy Cipriani from Channel 4 and Richard King Mellon's his editor? Would you rather have that? I can walk away right now.
Okay, sir, if I can just ask you to get towards the conclusion of your
I'll wrap it up in 30 seconds.
Thank you.
The Crips and the Bloods are out of jail. Their grandmothers, their mothers in Northside and Garfield were victimized. Their homes were taken on. You have out-of-state companies coming in here. You should put a moratorium on the purchase of lots till you know who the hell you're buying them and selling them. To who? To what entity? That's number one. Number two, You should take care of that bus stop. Number 3, URA, you should take care of 5202 Dearborn Street.
I wrote the address down. We will check on that. Thank you, sir.
When I leave here, I'll go down and ask Jardell for the second time when this work's going to be started.
Thank you. Any public comment? Yeah.
I just want to make sure I put the right phone number down. Leave that number.
Hi, my name is Megan Confer-Hammond. I'm the program director at the Fair Housing Partnership, and I'm also a city resident, 10 years in Greenfield, and prior to that to Point Breeze, and a graduate of Carnegie Mellon. I come here to follow up on Jay's fair housing piece, to provide a little bit of the granular data for a second in terms of the working knowledge of what discrimination in housing is looking like in the city limits. I've been at my job for 9 years. And in terms of understanding what segregation and what desegregation will require, is that ongoing investigations that we've been conducting over the past 6 to 9 months have been showing systemic geographic discrimination based on race in areas that are predominantly white throughout the city. Additionally, there is a geographic discrimination occurring throughout in the east areas particularly as it relates to families with children. And that occupancy policies are being used as a pretext to deny families with children access to housing where it's determined by housing providers that it's preferable not to have children in such units. And to follow up on that overall is the number one protected class that we receive as an allegation of housing discrimination is by far disability. And again, to Jay's point, we arrived a little after the meeting had started, and additionally, I'm deaf, and so following along the meeting is quite difficult, and I'll follow up on the minutes. So forgive me if it was discussed, and I am incorrect. But I would raise that there would be a discussion regarding the money being provided to direct housing sources as it relates to the physical accessibility of that housing. The built environment of Pittsburgh is so old that as we preserve affordable housing, we're also preserving physical inaccessibility as it relates predominantly to limited mobility. And day in and day out, I work with individuals who are struggling getting in and out of their kitchens and bathrooms. And personally, it's become a mission as I've worked from, Oakland to, the suburbs and the townships, when people are living in housing that they can barely get in and out of that unit, much less even enter to use their bathroom and or their kitchen. And so looking at that predominantly, such as with the preservation in Hazelwood, as well as using the power of the board to consider when building new construction, that the Fair Housing Act as it relates to design and construction, as well as ADA as it relates to the public common use areas of those buildings, is really a minimum from 1991 that doesn't truly provide accessibility if just the minimums of those are met. And so possibly considering visitability on top of the minimums that ADA and design and construction allow. I thank you for your time, and please enjoy your weekend.
Anyone else? Go ahead.
In our applications, I guess as we look at rolling our RFPs, this is when we might want to add something around, I know the racial segregation piece, which the city just created a department to track, so that might be something that we need to add into our applications, as well as the accessibility. I don't know if that's in our RFPs either. But I know, but like in terms of what we're asking people to provide and rate themselves on.
We do have a measure for, it's in the housing, it's part of the housing P4 metric.
Okay.
Visibility, certain percentage of units over UFAS standards. That being said, do we want to exceed that?
Or can we pull it out? Is it even getting really looked at? Because I know a lot of people are saying P4 is just too overwhelming. And
we can certainly revisit, we want to maybe put more of an emphasis.
Or just separate it out or something.
Yeah.
But these are the kind of things that we can look at as we recreate our RFPs. Okay. Advisory board, who isn't here?
All right. Adjourned.